All right, welcome to session 60 here at School 16, where we speak with experts in tech that were able to break in typically in very non-traditional ways. And oftentimes we have folks that have worked across many different organizations and held a lot of different types of roles. And the reason why we invite people like Katrina to speak with you all is to help you understand how it's possible to break into tech, even if you have no experience in tech, and certainly if you're not technical yourself. And today we're going to be talking about breaking into project management and operations, I would say. We'll try to keep the conversation focused, but in big tech, specifically as a contractor. And we're really excited to have Katrina Ryan with us today. Welcome, Katrina. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And Katrina, we promise we'll start with our first question in a second here, but just want to spend a few minutes with you folks to set a little bit of expectations for how this event will run. It'll be a lot of Katrina and us talking, but we want to hear from you. So if you have questions, you don't have to wait until the end of the event to ask your question. Go ahead and drop it into the chat. Now, there's a lot of us here in the room. We'll try to get through as many of them as possible. But the more relevant the question is to the topic and to people that are here in the room that are eager to learn from Katrina, the more likely it is to be asked. But again, we try to get through as many questions as possible, but you don't have to wait through the end. So drop them into the chat as we're going along. And if we have time in the end, we will maybe even ask some folks to unmute themselves and ask questions. Now, we see some of you all have your videos enabled, which is awesome. Guys, this is how we network these days, right? This is our opportunity to get some FaceTime with Katrina and each other, right? There's a lot of cool people here with really interesting, varied backgrounds and careers. And so by enabling your video, you see everybody's name here in the chat. You can also drop your LinkedIn into the chat as well. And so this is an opportunity for us all to connect. So we encourage you to do that throughout the session. We're going to go for the hour today. And so we're going to wrap up with our introduction in just a few minutes, and then we'll go through an introduction from Katrina, and then we're going to dig right into the nitty-gritty of how she was able to navigate her career. And again, as your questions come up, we'll weave them into the discussion. And generally, the main takeaway that we try to have for people is, how do you do this, right? Especially when you're starting from scratch. How do we uncover sort of the blueprint, right? The smoke and mirror sometimes that's out there in terms of navigating a career in general, but especially navigating a career in tech or a fast growth, innovative company. And so we're going to dig into as much of that as possible today with you all, but hope the conversation will be guided by you as well. And again, we'll wrap up by about 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here. Just really quickly, a few announcements for you folks. We are a school, we're an education institution, and we work with a lot of students that are looking to get some career guidance and learn direct skills to help them break into tech. So if you're interested in coming to more of these free sessions, you're always welcome to come here. You're always going to get access to these entirely for free, including these recordings. But of course, some people need more than that. So if you want to get direct live instructions from folks like Katrina, from folks like the people that you see on the screen, we do believe that the most effective way to learn, where you don't have to go back to school for 2 years to advance your career, is to do it from people that are in the field. So we do have a program that's kicking off at the end of July. We have cohorts starting every single month, but the deadline is coming up soon. So if you're interested, our admissions team is ready to chat with you all, and all you have to do is apply. And if you already did apply, which I'm sure a lot of the folks in this room already have, and you haven't heard back for some reason, or you want to get an update from the team, or you're curious to learn more about the program, just reach out to admissions@school16.co. We'll make sure to follow up with you all.
And I will add too that, even if you're just looking for some career advice and you don't know yet, do you need to take classes? Do you need to get certificates? We offer certificates in product management, marketing, sales, customer success, etc. Maybe you don't know yet. You can get some advice from our career advisors because they all have a lot of experience in tech. There's no obligations at all when you apply. So we encourage you all to do that. We believe a lot in live educational model, which is why all of our classes are live and online.
And of course, we keep them accessible through financing, partial scholarships, all that stuff. So make sure you reach out to us to chat about that. So we're going to stop sharing our screen, and I'll let Sergey take it away to kick off the first question here for Katrina as more people continue to filter in today.
Awesome. And as I begin my Q&A with Katrina, if you'd like to tell us in the chat if there's a particular reason you joined us here today, if there was really something in particular that you were hoping to learn from Katrina, I can ask questions all day. I love doing it, but I'd love to ask things that are relevant to you. So let us know why you came here, what you were hoping to learn. That would be super helpful. And so to start things off, Katrina, if you take a look at Katrina's LinkedIn, just type in Katrina Ryan. You can look at global project management consultant at Meta, and you'll find her. You'll see that she has a very varied experience, a lot of different work that you've done. You've done teaching early on in your career in France. You've done, you've been an office manager. You've been a program manager. You've done so many different things that led you to this job now as a global project management consultant at one of the fastest growing and biggest tech companies in the country, in the world, really. And so I want to hear sort of the beginning of your career, how you thought about it. A lot of us, we graduate college, we have aspirations for ourselves. Maybe we have aspirations that we want to be in tech, or we don't really know. Was tech on your radar when you graduated, and how were you thinking about it early on in your career?
Yeah, tech was absolutely not on my radar at all. I graduated as a sociology major. I thought I was going to join the Peace Corps or do some sort of research. And I was like many college students who are seniors, you're just kind of looking for a job and looking to see what lands. And my first job was at Parsons. Ironically, at the Career Services Center, where people ask, what am I doing with my life? And I'm kind of asking them the same question, like, I don't know, what am I doing with my life? So it's just being able to learn from those experiences that you have. Office management is very operational and things of that nature. I was able to manage a group of student workers, so people on work study. So that's how I got like a couple of management skills. And I just really utilized my LinkedIn, and I applied to a bunch of jobs when I wanted to move on. I got recruited by someone. And usually when you get a contract, they don't tell you who the company is. They're just like, oh, you seem to be a good fit. Are you interested in marketing operations, or are you interested in product marketing? And I said yes. And the company happened to be with American Express. And it kind of just starts from there. While I was at American Express, I worked on very small teams. I worked on the Business Centurion card. So that's like the black card, colloquially known as. And I did everything. You wear many hats early in your career. And that's how you can suss out like, okay, I'm maybe not really into product marketing, but I really enjoyed marketing operations. I liked working with different cross-functionally with different business units and groups of individuals, and seeing things go from conception to deployment. So that was something that I really enjoyed. I started seeing gaps in, workflows, and I was able to facilitate like optimizing a workflow where our turnaround time was decreased by 40%. So you're able to, figure out what it is that you like and then really just like capitalize on it. I think a big thing also is like making it known to like your manager, what do you enjoy doing? What your interests are? Because that's how you get folks to advocate for you. That's how you get folks to, let you do those stretch projects that are really more in your sphere of interest. So you can make that pivot and you can develop those transferable skills. And then from there, I worked at MasterCard. I did product marketing there. I did it for about 3 months because I got laid off. And that's one of the risks of being a contractor. Like you're at will, and I got 3 days notice, and it was a year contract. So those are some things that you need to be prepared about when it comes with contracting. But then also like with contracting, you can increase your rate by about 50%. Like within a year. Whereas like if you're a full-time employee, there's caps to that. Sometimes it's up to 15%, which is why sometimes external candidates will come in making way more money than someone who gets promoted, and you guys have the same, you know, job description. So those are some things that I definitely like about being a contractor. You get to be flexible and you get to pick and choose what it is that you want and what it is that you're interested in. But definitely leverage your environment, looking for things that you want, capitalizing on it, getting those stretch projects that may be of interest to you as well. And yeah, I mean, there's, you know, COVID hit. I took some odd jobs, and those odd jobs were pretty transferable. Like I did reservations at Nobu, which is like a restaurant franchise. And then I also did customer service at a mattress company. So those are, with those things, like it really helps me as a project manager, because projects, anything can happen. Like we're not working with robots, you're not working with machines. You're working with individuals. So anything can happen, things will go wrong, and that's okay. We just need to figure out how to sort of course correct, and then, you know, give that feedback after, because we can't dawdle on it during the time. Therefore, like, you're just like kind of wasting your time, you know, saying like, oh, this happened and this happened. You're gonna have mishaps. We're human, it happens. And yeah, I mean, how did I get to Meta? I got recruited on LinkedIn again, and it's this same process. Like, do you want to be a project manager? Yes, I want to be a project manager. The company happens to be, you know, it was Facebook at the time. The company is Facebook. Are you interested in Facebook? I was like, okay, cool, yeah. And I, you know, did my interviews and I got the job. I know I'm making it seem like, oh, it's like that easy. It wasn't that easy. It's a lot of work, and you have to, you know, really just like hone your skills and be eager, and also be like, very open. Like, you can't just, you have to be able to take feedback well. And I feel like that's what helps folks grow. Like, that's what helps me grow. I'm a very transparent individual. So like, if I am able to give constructive feedback, I should also be able to take constructive feedback as well. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got to Meta. I've been there since December 2020. And I've been able there to augment what I do. I started doing like kind of creative project management, and right now I'm working on like tooling and operations within that's going to help with our current department, in experimental marketing. So it's really cool. It's been a pretty wild ride, to say the least. And if you were to ask Katrina in like 2012, 2013, if I would be at like Facebook, I would probably laugh in your face. But you know, it happens. Here I am.
Here you are. Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through that journey. And we have some great questions that are starting to come into the chat, which we're going to address in a second here.
Sure.
But I love your story. I love how you were able to start getting these opportunities in various contracts and leveling up along the way as well. And I know it sounds, like you said, it sounds like it was easy. Oh, like you got recruited, but you continue to build your expertise and resume and how you position yourself. In fact, folks, if you look at Katrina's LinkedIn, I mean, the way that you describe yourself and your work, I think is really impactful. It shows your leadership qualities. It shows the impact you've had in these organizations, and it speaks to your ability to be productive in these roles right away. So I think that that's part of the reason why you've been recruited. But I want to hear a little bit about that first opportunity that you got. That you were recruited into American Express, I believe that you mentioned. You mentioned that, you know, you were doing a lot of work on LinkedIn, you were networking, probably you were maybe applying to jobs and the like. Can you break that down a little bit for us and how you approached that when you were trying to get into that tech role? You know, we have a question here that's relevant from Eden about maybe the difference between a standard CV resume and a tech-related CV. Maybe we can talk about it from the perspective of your LinkedIn profile, but why do you think you were recruited for that first contract? And then we can talk about how you went from there.
I think, you know, operations in general is very transferable. So if you're able to prove that you can organize yourself, you can finish one project like from start to finish successfully, in a timely manner. And what people really like to see is that you're able to do several projects over the course of your tenure there. So I think that was a really big thing that helped me pivot from a more administrative role to more of a project management role, within marketing. I also worked, in design where I had to market different, where I had to do event production. I had to wear different hats. I did marketing for a lot of the university events that came through the Career Services Center. As you can imagine, at a place that's Parsons, like for those of you who may not know, is like one of the biggest fashion schools in the world. So it's a lot of different like clients and companies are coming in and asking to look at students, do informational sessions, do internship sessions. So when you're getting that influx of individuals or companies, you have to create certain workflows to help automate that process. And those are some of the things that I was able to do, but I wasn't able to do it without, again, it takes a team. It's not like me by myself. You have to be able to know like who does what, specializes in what, and utilize them in terms of partnerships. That's how you also grow relationships with other folks. So to like pivot into whatever it is that you want. And that's, I think, how I got my role at American Express, because I was able to prove out that I can do these specific things.
Now, did you ever have any, as you were navigating these different companies, did you ever have any pushback that maybe you don't have a certain type of experience, maybe you don't have tech experience or something else that they thought was necessary?
I think a big thing for some of the roles was more so I didn't have like traditional project. Like when I first started pivoting more into project management, some people were like, you don't have traditional project management experience. And so I had to, build my CV to prove out that like, okay, I don't have project management experience, but I have implemented the principles of project management in my everyday work, whether it's, like executing 300 campaigns from start to finish in like a 6-month span, whether it's leading, multi-product email marketing campaigns, because sometimes like places at American Express, you're working with different card products and things like that. So you're working on a lot of products at once, you're working with a lot of business units at once, and you're working on different marketing channels at once. Like there was a point where I was working on email marketing, I was working on phone marketing, which is phone scripts, I was working on web marketing, which is like the website itself, and I was working on direct mail. So I was working on a lot of different things across a lot of different categories. And I think that proves out like you have to be organized in order to be able to do that. And also, like, I think coming from finance is really meticulous. Like you have to make sure that like you have to make sure that like what you're saying is like correct. Otherwise you're going to get sued. And like, that's just not fun. To like get into that compliance segment. So you have to be really on like your P's and Q's and have a really good attention to detail. And I feel like because I was coming from finance, people already had this assumption that I proved that like I have a good attention to detail, I work cross-functionally, and I work with different products. So those things kind of spoke for themselves, but I also put in my resume to prove out like, okay, I've done project management adjacent things. This is why I would be a good project manager.
Interesting. I'm curious, Katrina, because the way that you've been talking about your experience, your experience with running email marketing campaigns as a product marketer, maybe other different types of projects, and much like probably a lot of people in this room, I would imagine you consider yourself quite a generalist, and a lot of us do, right? And so when you do have all of these different skill sets, but you're looking for a very specialized type of opportunity within an organization, how do you communicate to them that you will be able to do that type of work and not make the hiring manager, or maybe even who you're networking with, feel distracted by some of this other stuff that you've done that might not be as directly relevant? How do you make it targeted towards that particular opportunity?
Yeah, you have to have a through line. So for me, like, am I putting that I was a customer service representative in all of my resumes? No, I'm not doing that. You have to choose the roles that you've had that would be most relevant to the job that you're applying for, essentially. I'm not saying, I think people are saying like, there's a lot of like, I feel like misconceptions that people say like, oh, you need to have like, you have to, customize your email for every different opportunity you have. that's really tiring. Like looking for a job is already a full-time job in and of itself. And so to tailor a resume like 10 to 15 times a day, that's a little ludicrous. So for me, I have a master resume of all the jobs that I've had with, you know, all the impact that I made. And then depending on the roles that I'm applying for, I have a resume that's more tailored to like project management. I have a resume that's a little bit more tailored to marketing, specifically like email marketing and operations. But I think from there, like you have to, based on like what it is that they're looking for, you can pick like, okay, like these roles that I did, I think will most, you know, exemplify why I would be a good candidate for this role. So that's pretty much how I like do my job search if I'm submitting resumes.
Now, when you started to get more into these tech specific roles, you did CRM marketing, you've been a contractor at Mana now for almost 2 years. Did you have to then speak about yourself in a more tech oriented way and add tech language in your resume?
No, I'm a project manager, but specifically I'm a creative project manager. So I work specifically with designers. I work with a lot of creative strategists. I work with brands and creative agencies. So the only technical sort of folks that I work with would be people in marketing science, folks who do data analysis, who pull data for target segmentation. If you're targeting specific audiences for specific campaigns. But for me, like I think especially in tech, they're seeing the importance of these non-technical roles. Because for me, I have a bird's eye view of, even though I'm not a tech person, I can understand like, okay, we may need like an engineer here, or we may need like a marketing science person here. Whereas like people who are in product or people who are in a more focused business unit, they're only seeing what it is that they need. So for me, like my advantage is that I work cross-functionally and I have a broad idea, a high level idea of what everyone does like around me, and who to tap into when I have a big project going on.
And I think that answers Dikshita's question about technical skills for these roles. You know, we strongly believe, and it sounds like through Katrina's experience, it's also you know, the same thing where you don't have to be technical for these roles. Now, if you're applying for something that's very specialized, like a technical project manager role,
yeah,
you need to be a little bit more technical, right? But for your roles, it sounds like you didn't need to be technical or show that you had to be technical.
No.
But Brandon has a good question to kind of dig into this a little bit more. You know, he's curious if there were any specific hard skills, like specific types of software or methodologies or specializations or anything else that you feel like you helped you or that you had to display on your resume or in your cover letter or whatever it is to get some of these contracts.
Yeah, I think some of the hard skills that I've learned is like specific tools. So it would be really good to learn different types of project management softwares. For me in marketing and like customer relationship management, I know how to use different marketing tools such as like Braze or Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I specialize in email marketing, so I know how to use different sorts of email specific platforms like a MailChimp or like again a Braze, because you can do like HTML. But those are like bonuses that I happen to learn along the way. In terms of like hard skills, I think it's always important, especially like if you don't know anything about project management, to take a course, like literally any course in project management, because it'll give you like what is an agile methodology versus what is Scrum methodology and things of that nature. While you're in it, you may not say like, oh, I need to use agile methodology for this, but you can put 2 and 2 together and say like, oh, I could take more of an agile approach based on the course that I've taken. So in terms of hard skills, like tooling is cool, but I would definitely suggest like learning like or going to take a project management specific course.
Now, let's say I'm in a role where I don't get to use Salesforce or MailChimp or one of these tools. How do I bridge that gap? Because I mean, yeah, I can play around with Salesforce on my free time, but And I think you mentioned this early on, stretch projects, maybe that gives the hint to the answer, but how do you make sure that you can create that experience using these tools or learning about these tools so you can actually talk about it in an interview in a way that doesn't make it feel like, oh, okay, this person just downloaded a free license and played around for like 10
Yeah, I think being clear with what you want and your career goals with your manager or someone that you trust, because I know sometimes like toxic work environment. So I understand you may not want to say that I want to be in a different role, but go to someone maybe at work that you perhaps trust, or even like your peers within a network and say, hey, I'm interested in using this type of tool. What do you suggest I do? Sorry, I live next to a playground. Yeah, I would say like, if you can't do a stretch project, rely on that network or rely on individuals that you trust, whether it's at work or outside of work, to say like, hey, like I'm interested in using this. How can I, dig more into it? So they can like help you.
That's true. A lot of people feel like, well, I was hired for this job and that's what I have to do. And they kind of shy away from asking for other responsibilities or even going to other departments and asking to do side jobs, side work or projects outside of their scope. But that's how you get promotions internally. And that's how you're able to transition out of the maybe job that you have now to something that you feel like you'd be better at or happier doing. Which brings me to Fernanda's question, which is, for someone that's just starting out, right, earlier on in their career, they want their first project management opportunity. What do you think is important in terms of the main skills to acquire or to spend their time on so that they can start becoming more marketable for that first job? Because it is harder to get your foot in the door, than if you had, let's say, 5-10 years of experience that you can kind of position as something else. If you're first starting off, you kind of have to be selective of where you're spending your time and how you position yourself. So what would you say to Fernanda or anybody else that wants to get their first role in project management?
I think the biggest thing is being able to work cross-functionally. And what cross-functionally means is that you are working with different businesses, different departments within like your role or job. So making sure that like how to work with different individuals, different stakeholders, how to influence and how to work well with those individuals, I think will really, help you and set you up for success in terms of like project management. When I was working at like the new school, I worked with, career counselors, I worked with student workers, I worked with professors, I worked with senior leadership. So it was a very like centralized role in which I had to work with several different groups of people. I worked with like study abroad folks, and making that known in like your resume, worked cross-functionally with X amount of business units or X amount of departments to get your job done. I feel like that's the biggest thing in project management, because you're the one that has a general idea of everything that's going on. So without you, you're like kind of like that glue that helps that project go, that helps that project go forward essentially. So yeah, working cross-functionally I think is very key. And I think that's the easiest transferable thing that any job can do, because usually most jobs you're working with more than one, group of individuals. So
yeah, that's actually very true. You're so right. And you can get that experience from a lot of different types of jobs. A lot of people are kind of obsessed with, well, I want to work at Google or Meta or Snapchat or whatever. But sometimes if you join a startup, you're wearing a lot of hats, you're working across different departments. You are encouraged to take on different projects across different departments. And you should look for opportunities to work at companies that encourage that. That may be something you ask about in an interview. Will I have the opportunity to work with different people, different departments and the like? Because that will help you position yourself as a cross-functional individual, someone that understands how different departments work and understands how to work with leaders and with different levels of the organization to get things done. So I really love that example, because that is exactly what a project manager does.
Yeah. And can I also just add that like, I feel like in tech or like working in tech, like the end all be all is like, oh, I want to work at like a Meta. I want to work at like what they call like a FANG company. So like that's Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, things like that. And like those companies are cool. There are so many companies that have so many that are really great, that have so many like benefits, that will give you the same opportunities and the same like tools that you would get while working at a Google or, you know, a Meta or something like that. So I just want to encourage folks to like not be so narrow set. Like if that's your dream, cool. I don't want to diminish anyone's dream, but like realistically and pragmatically, there's just so many great tech companies like just globally that you can really like, you know, get really great experience and things of that nature. So I just want to also add that it's not the end all be all if you don't make it to like a Meta or a Google.
I'm glad you added that, because you're right. There are a lot of great companies out there. And even, you know, when the economy isn't doing that great objectively, there are companies that are still doing great. So you have to target the right industry. And oftentimes you can use opportunities at a different company as a stepping stone to then a bigger company if you aren't or something else.
And actually, ironically enough, I have submitted my resume to places and they didn't accept me because I have worked at too many big companies. So they think that like I'm too cushy, I'm too comfortable, and I'm not like as scrappy. But I mean, I'm from New York, so I'm pretty scrappy. So
obviously you are scrappy, so they're missing out.
Yeah.
But you're happy where you are. But no, you know, a lot of really important things that you mentioned there, targeting the right companies, that those cross-functional skill sets, which you can get in other industries, a university setting, a nonprofit, whatever it is, right? And then make sure that you communicate it in your resume, because it is oftentimes a relationship role. You're working with different stakeholders. You'd be surprised how often you probably need to be on the phone or in meetings as a project manager, I'm sure, right? And so even though it's an operational role and you need to be very organized, that other side of it is going to be critical to communicate on your resume or cover letter. The next question, I'm going to ask Sarah's question and then David's. And Sarah's curious, because we were talking about the tools and sort of skills that you need to have, is more around sort of these methodologies. What should you prioritize if you're going to learn, like Scrum, Waterfall, or Agile? Does it matter? Do you have to know everything? You know, there's so much information out there, especially for project managers. What do you choose?
Honestly, like I use Agile a lot because like designers you need to exhibit a little bit of flexibility. But I feel like the biggest tool, and I know this is going to sound really corny, is exhibiting empathy. I'm a very empathy forward project manager. You just need to understand, like, excuse my language, shit happens, like things happen, and you don't know what's going on in someone else's life. You don't know what's going on like in the grand scheme of things. Things happen, and you have to have that understanding instead of being like, we're not on schedule. You know what? You need to create like some padding. I always create padding in my timelines in case things like that happen. And even if we're a little bit late, again, like thankfully we don't work at a hospital, so it's not necessarily the end of the world, but you know, you just need to be able to roll with the punches. And I think being understanding, I feel like that's helped me to develop my relationships with other folks. And that's helped me, especially if I happen to be in a bind, they know me and we have a strong enough relationship that I'm able to, you know, get a quicker turnaround time from someone, whether instead of like, if I like cold called, you know, a specific colleague. So I feel like empathy is like cross-functional relationships and like being empathetic, because you don't know what's going to happen, what's going on with other people.
Yeah, and I found through my experience working in tech and even just talking to my instructors that oftentimes the methodology doesn't really matter, because you can even take one methodology and 3 different companies will implement it differently, right?
Yeah.
So it's more so about understanding it and then understanding the problem and how you can solve it best through a particular methodology or a mix of methodologies.
Yeah, you have to do what works for the team. I also work on a global team, so there are other things that I have to consider, you know, cultural sensitivities, time zones, how people interact with one another. So for me, like what I've started doing is I do like a quick intake form. How do you like to be communicated with? If you work in like a more like further time zone away from me. So I work with a lot of people in Singapore. Do they prefer, morning meetings? Do they prefer later meetings? Do they prefer meetings at all? Like, can we, do things over chat, or like we have workplace groups that we have. So I think that's a really big thing. And again, that's like being empathetic and being understanding of other people's, living situations or like global situations and things like that. And I feel like those things really help in getting the job done. I feel like, especially in marketing and in a lot of these project facing things, people think about the output way too much. And it's like, your output is not going to be as good as it can be if your input is just like all over the place and people are just like panic doing things just to get the job done. So
that's really good advice, Katrina. Thank you. Okay, next question is from David, and it's a good one because it is, one of the focuses of our discussion today, because we're thinking about this through the lens of a contractor. What are the differences in the recruitment and onboarding process between an employee and a contractor? Any pros and cons? What are your thoughts?
I think with contracting, there's nuances. Like, for instance, there's certain meetings that I can't go to. Like if there's like a quarterly, for instance, at Meta, like they have quarterly meetings with Mark Zuckerberg. I can't join those meetings because they have sensitive information. But like once it goes out to the public, I'm able to know those. And I feel like they vary from company to company. So it's really important to know what those nuances are, so you know where your boundaries are. And then also being able to advocate for yourself. Like as a contractor, like onboarding for me, it's kind of like I feel like because a lot of full-time folks don't work with or they don't people manage contractors, they're always like, I feel like they kind of treat us like children. They're like, oh, you can't do this, and make sure you put in your time card and things like that. And I feel very regulated, and I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever, is this over now? Whereas like with full-time, it's sort of like, welcome to the family, and like, here are all your benefits and things of that nature. So I think being able as a contractor to advocate for yourself is really big. Like that's what I did while I was at Meta. There was a couple of things that as a contractor I wasn't allowed to do, but I needed it for my job. And like I advocated for myself. And I also called out like people need to know how to work with contractors because there are nuances. You can't just say like, oh, you're a contractor, but like I don't see you as a contractor. To me, I feel like that's the same thing when people say like, I don't see like color, like as I'm not racist, I don't see color. It's like, no, it's like you need to know that like there are nuances to being a contractor and how to work with those. So yeah, I feel like the biggest difference is just like where your paycheck is coming from. Like my paycheck usually comes from an agency or like the vendor that Meta works with versus, and I don't get RSUs, like which is restricted stock units. That's like the biggest difference. Other than that, like it does vary from agency to agency. So make sure when you're, signing a contract with an agency, you know what the benefits are. Because some of them, they have like really great benefits. Like I have vacation time, I have PTO with my current agency. I have like 401k. I have other things like travel and travel benefits. Whereas like some places, they will not give you anything and you have to pay for everything out of pocket. And what they say is they'll be like, oh, well, we're giving you the max rate. So that's why you have to pay for everything. And, sometimes that's fine, but other times it's just like not worth it. So definitely when you speak with an agency, know what the benefits are before signing with them.
That's really good advice. I'm curious about the process, working with an agency and then going into these interviews. It sounds like these agencies reached out to you in a couple of the cases that you mentioned. But then, with as they found these opportunities for their clients, in this case Meta, can you tell us a little bit more about that interview process and how you prepared for it? Now, to me you sound like you are a pretty assertive communicator and you're good at talking about yourself. So maybe if you can give us some insight about how you positioned yourself and throughout that process so you would stand out and increase your chances of being brought on as the contractor.
Yeah, I mean, I think My interview process is pretty actually similar to like a full-time employee. I interviewed with for a contract role at Meta, I interviewed with 5 different individuals. And traditionally, like for full-time employees, like they interview with about 5 different people as well. So I think one thing is like being able to clearly articulate like why you deserve this role, why you're the best candidate for this role. That's why looking at the job description is super important. What I do is like I'll look at the job description, I'll highlight where I stand out, and I'll have specific examples of like this is how I stand out in these different things. And then I also have questions. Like I have very in-depth questions because sometimes like a JD like doesn't give you the whole flavor of what the job really entails. So I think it's really good to come with questions and come prepared. And then also like be yourself. Like I feel like we are in like this day and age where we like it's tiring to have like this fake attitude. Who I am at work is who I am outside of work. And I pride myself on that. So be yourself, because if you can't be yourself, it's just going to be, I was like, there was a point in time where I was like so stressed out when I was in finance because I had to put on this like face. I had to pretend that I watched The Bachelor. I do not. And things like that. So I think like, just like they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them to see if you want to be there. Because like they can offer you the role, but like it's up to you to take it. So that's how I prepare for interviews.
I really like that you said that last part, you know, you're interviewing them as well. And I know that it's hard to really embody that confidence sometimes when you've been looking for a job, maybe you faced a lot of rejection, which by the way, all of us have, and I'm sure Katrina has as well. But
So
when you, yeah, exactly. But when you are confident, when you can sort of kind of summon that confidence and ask the questions and make the other side feel like, hey, well, you still need to win me over, it actually increases the chances of them wanting you more, quite frankly, as a professional, but also you standing out as someone that can actually come in and solve problems. Because if you're confident in the interview process, and if you know what you want, then they're going to feel like you're going to know what you're doing when you're directing people or directing a project or different stakeholders or whatever it is as well.
Exactly. And even though like you have that grace period of like, there's time where of course you need to learn the company and like the ins and outs and the nuances, you were hired for a reason. So like definitely be confident that like you are a subject matter expert in the role that they hired you for. And that's another thing with contracting. I feel like there's a misconception that you're like diet meta or meta light. It's like, no, I got hired for this role because I'm qualified to be part of this institution. So when you're contracting for a big company, you're able to get hired for a role full time. Like, don't let that deter you. Don't let people say like, I can't, you can't convert. Plenty of people convert contractually to full time all the time. It may not be in the role that you're currently in, depending on the circumstance, but it's possible. And don't let other people, especially full-time folks, tell you different, because usually they have never been a contractor. They've never worked with contractors before. And like, just don't let them deter you. You're going to have advocates, and let those people be your advocates. And then just like forget about the other people for sure.
I agree with that. Anytime anyone is saying something that is designed to remove your confidence, you should ignore them and only listen to the people that are giving you confidence, like Katrina is doing right now. So thank you for that, Katrina.
Yeah, of course.
Eden had a follow-up question to what you just said, which is when you are trying to extract more information and ask those critical questions. And I think it's so important to ask the right questions, because then that helps you position yourself as the right choice when you know what they need. So what are some of those questions that you like to ask during interviews when you're going through that process?
I really like to ask like where the gaps are. Like, why are you hiring for this position? Why is this open? What gaps are you expecting this position to fulfill? Are there any like KPIs or like certain targets that we need to meet? and things of that nature. I also like to ask like what excites them about, you know, their current role. Because you don't usually you're being interviewed by someone who's a hiring manager. That means that person is most likely going to be your manager. And do you really want to be managed by someone who is miserable, or you want to be managed by someone who's like looking for another job? No, you want to be managed by someone who's passionate about what they do, who's excited to expand their team, and things of that nature. So, like I said, just like they're interviewing you, you need to interview them.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you show that you've actually like dug into the job description, you know, read about the department and their challenges, whatever it is, right? Did your research and don't just ask surface level questions, right? You're asking questions that will make them feel like you're already in the role, asking the question the first week of your job, right? Not just as an interviewee. That also increases your chances of success. So I think it's really good advice. And folks, we have about 9 minutes left with our conversation with Katrina here. So if there's any other pressing questions, feel free to please drop them into the chat. And then in the end, we'll share some additional resources with you all who are interested in breaking into project management. I'm going to go to Fernanda's question next. Two-part question. So what is the most challenging for you, I guess, aspect of your role or for you as a project manager? And what is your favorite strategy to motivate all those different stakeholders that you're working with to get things done?
I think the most challenging thing about project management, especially in a design environment, is that I don't know if for anyone who's worked in like a creative environment or environment with designers are very averse to anything that has to do with process. They want to be able to design, get their artistic juices flowing. They want to make sure things are perfect. So I feel like the biggest challenge is always pushing the project along sometimes. And for me, like how I combat that is that I'm objective about it. I'm objective and then also solutions oriented. So I'll say like, hey, how's it going? How is this work happening? When do you think this will happen? Asking really concrete questions, like, when do you think you'll get this done? And then also like kind of giving the, you know, if we don't get it by this date, we're going to have to push this target drop date to X, Y, and Z. And so sometimes that lights a fire underneath them. But then also, like, again, being empathy forward, you can be like, do you need additional help? Is there anyone that I can like reach out to help you? Are you stuck with something? Sometimes like that might be the case. They may be stuck on something. And sometimes like people are not the best at asking for help. So as a project manager, you're kind of, since it is your job to keep that project going along, you need to, you know, sometimes you need to ask those questions. Sometimes you need to be a little bit of, you know, like a cheerleader or an encourager to say like, hey, like we're in this together. It's not like a them thing. Like I'm very much like a team like centric person, you know, teamwork makes the dream work. Some of my best projects have been like on really like nice, like tight teams. And so like, I understand that sometimes like things fall on the wayside. So just being like that supportive person instead of being like someone's aunt or someone's like parent, being like, well, you know, you better get this done or else, like, that's not going to help anyone. They're going to think that I'm just like this mean person and they're not going to want to work with me. But if I say like, hey, like, how can we get this done together? They feel less alone, and like maybe we can, you know, help like break through and like get to the next step.
For sure, that empathy, you know, it sounds simple, but in practice, obviously, especially when you're dealing with people that are higher up than you,
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's so important to get things done.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like it's really important to be objective with things, not like, oh, I really think you should get this done or else. It's like, no, you need to be straightforward. If we don't get this done, this is gonna happen. So sometimes you need that like construct like that almost that like tough love, so to speak. But you know, also being empathetic and saying like, hey, like we are a team. Is there a resource that I can grab? Because as a project manager, that's what you do. Like you're solutions oriented. You can be able to tap into different sorts of teams that can help them get the job done. So yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it is a more effective way to get things done, because if you show that empathy, people are going to feel like they should actually work on whatever it is you're asking them to work on, because hey, this person is being nice, not too pushy, but I also objectively understand the importance of getting this past the finish line and whatever it is, and they're that much more likely to be helpful. And that's why I think psychology majors, sociology majors, that probably have a leg up, because you've been exposed to some of these things and understanding how other humans think, because that's so much of the work that we have to do. But hey, I come from economics and finance, and I was able to figure it out. So oftentimes, if you prioritize that through your experiences as something that is important to get good at, the communication, showing empathy, all these things, that is going to go a long way. And it's going to, I think, show through the way you ask questions and answer questions, even when you're being evaluated for a particular role.
Yeah, and you might also get insight to what is being a roadblocker. That way you can advocate for said individual that you may think is a roadblock, to say like, hey, this is a bigger underlying issue. What do we do to resolve that? So it's not always just like individual, like this person is like, I'm waiting on this person to do something. It might be like a bigger issue that you have to tackle too.
Exactly. Sarah asked about work-life balance as a project manager. And, especially as a contractor, I've been a contractor before. It looks like right now you have one main contract with Meta. I've had 3 contracts at once, and you're working for 3 different bosses, and it can definitely get stressful, where it's even harder, or more hours, or at least a lot of context switching, where mentally it's more taxing than one full-time job. So what do you feel is like, how important it is for you? And as a contractor, a project manager, what do you feel is the work-life balance there?
Work-life balance is super important. I'm going on vacation tomorrow for like 2.5 weeks. So like, it is important. If you are not good within yourself, how are you going to exhibit good output? So work-life balance is really important. Even like at Meta, like where I currently work, I do have I'm just finishing off other contracts with some other brands, but yes, Meta is my main contract. I'm clear with like, hey, I'm going on vacation for like 2 weeks. And it's a trust thing. Like, you trust your team is going to be able to move forward with whatever it is they need to do within those 2 weeks. And that way you can unplug. So, and if they can't, like, I don't mean to be blunt, but like, that's not your problem. Like, you need to be able to properly disconnect and like enjoy your life. I'm more of like a work to live gal. I love what I do, but like, I work to live. I don't live to work. So yeah, I'm really big with work-life balance. I'm really big on boundary setting. Like, I'm not doing 11 p.m. or like 2 a.m. meetings unless it's like super important, and unless, like, again, global sensitivities. If I see someone doing it on like their end, if I see someone from Singapore coming in at an 11 p.m. meeting, I'll be like, okay, what are you doing? But also like understanding that like it's that balance of give and take. So yeah, it's all about compromise and boundary setting for sure. And as a contractor, don't be afraid, because again, they hired you for a reason. So don't be afraid that like, oh, like they might fire me if I take too many days off. Like, it happens. Last year, I took a mental health like break because I was burned out, and people were understanding. I understand that that's not always the case everywhere you go, but again, you have to take care of yourself in order for you to create the best output.
Exactly. And if they're not understanding, then you probably
not the right place.
Exactly.
Next. Yeah.
Next.
No, again, so important what you shared there, the boundaries piece. I think, oftentimes, and I talk to some friends who hate their jobs, and they're like, oh, my boss is calling me, it's 9 p.m. Don't pick up. Like, have you communicated to your boss or to the team that you shouldn't be bothered at certain hours? Most people, when you ask that question, the answer is no. Now, again, every organization and culture is different, but that's where that might mean you may need to make a change. And so it is really important to prioritize that. We're getting here to the last minute of our conversation with Katrina. First of all, I want to thank everyone that came here today and asked the really insightful questions. Again, I'm going to share an additional resource with you all in a second here, but Katrina, your responses have been amazing. I learned a lot here today, and I'm certain that everyone in the room did as well. Your transparency was awesome as well. So I really appreciate you sharing this insight with us today. I guess one last question for you. What's next for Katrina? Are you interested in staying a contractor? You talked about maybe converting to full time. Like, is that potentially a goal for you?
Yeah, I feel like contracting can, as cool as it is, like to be able to increase your rate and work where you want and kind of work everywhere, I wouldn't have the experiences that I have if it weren't for contracting. I think for me, like I'm ready to go be full-time somewhere. I feel like I have enough in my toolbox where I can make a longer lasting impact that's beyond like 8 to 14 months. But I mean, I'm open to anything. So if there's a good contract that's on the pipeline, then I'm cool. If there's a good full-time opportunity in the pipeline, I'm cool with that too. My contract at Meta ends in September. Whatever happens, happens. If not, then I guess I'm going to be on vacation or sabbatical. So yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. Everyone, please feel free to add me on LinkedIn. If you have any other questions, this is not like a one and done thing. Please feel free to ask them to me. I love answering questions. As you can tell, I'm kind of a loquacious person, aka I talk a lot. So yeah, please feel free to reach out with any additional project management questions or contractor questions and things of that nature.
That's awesome. Really, thank you, Katrina, for sharing yourself as a resource for the folks in this room, because it is super helpful to learn from somebody like yourself that's been through it. And everybody here is going to have a different story, but hopefully there's a lot of takeaways and nuggets for you all that they give you some confidence into how you should approach your next step, whether that's a contract opportunity or not. And part of the reason why we're talking about contracting is because sometimes that's the best foot in the door, right? If you're getting no's looking for full-time roles, go ahead and start applying for contract roles, find those agencies, whatever it is, reach out. And when you're networking, offer to be a contractor. Hey, I'm happy to start part-time if you'd like. I'm consulting with a couple other firms right now, or whatever makes sense for you. And that might be your foot in the door. Really quickly, again, for those of you in here in the room with us today, if you haven't applied to our program yet, we encourage you to apply. Even if you're not going to go through our school, our admissions team is super helpful in helping have one-on-one conversations like the ones that we've had today with a big group. So even if that admissions call gives you some career guidance, we would love to help you. But also for those of you in the room that are a little bit more senior, we do have direct concentrations, and we have a concentration of project management that's starting at the end of August. Same exact apply link, which I dropped into the chat a little bit earlier, I believe. So go ahead and follow that, and we're happy to help you as well. And again, for those of you that joined a little bit later, bummed out that they missed this live session, we will have the recording available for you. So if you're not on our email list, feel free to sign up on our website, school16.co. But also if you follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn, you'll hear more about these events as they are coming up. So thanks again, Katrina, so much for sharing all this wisdom with our community here at School16. I'm sure a lot of people are going to watch this video as well on our website once it goes live in the next few days. But also best of luck to you, and hopefully we'll have you back as a speaker or a mentor and get you even more involved with School16.
Yeah, my pleasure. This was actually my first speaking engagement. So
awesome.
Yeah, a pleasure. Yeah, loved it.
You're a natural, and I'm glad that we were able to get you on the calendar right before your vacation. But well-deserved time off. Enjoy the 2.5 weeks or whatever it is that you're taking off, and thank you again, and thanks folks for answering those thoughtful questions. And we will see you all at an event likely in the next couple of weeks, so stay tuned for announcements about new events. Thanks again, Katrina.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye.